The cracks in the masterpiece of their love. A husband's world shatters as he discovers his wife's secret rendezvous were not with strangers, but with a trusted colleague. A betrayal made deeper by the professional and personal overlap, turning shared confidences into tools of deception. I'm still not sure how I'm even supposed to say this out loud, let alone get it all down in a way that makes sense. It feels like trying to reassemble a shattered mirror, only every single shard is still sharp, and the reflection is warped, twisted into something unrecognizable. If you're hearing this, if you're reading this, and you've ever felt like your whole world just imploded, then maybe you'll understand. And hey, while we're talking about understanding, if any of this resonates with you, or even if it just makes you think, please hit that like button. Seriously, it helps a ton. And if you're feeling generous, share it with someone who might need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what comes next, because believe me, there's a lot more to this story. And leave a comment. Tell me what you think. Tell me if you've been there. Anything. Just something. It started, I guess, with a feeling. A tiny, almost imperceptible tremor under the solid ground of our marriage. Sarah and I, we were supposed to be the couple everyone envied, the ones who had it all figured out. We met in college, a cliche, I know, but it felt epic. She was this ball of fire, smart, ambitious, with a laugh that could light up a room and eyes that held a universe. I was quieter, content to be in her orbit. We built a life, brick by careful brick. A beautiful house in a quiet suburb, 2 cars in the driveway, the whole damn picture. We worked hard, both of us. She was climbing the corporate ladder at a big tech firm, sharp and driven. I had my own thing, a small design studio, creative and fulfilling, but nothing on her scale. We were a team. That's what I always told myself, what I believed with every fiber of my being. We celebrated each other's wins, commiserated over the losses. Our nights were filled with shared meals, tired sighs, and the comfort of knowing someone had your back. Or so I thought. The first crack wasn't even a visible fissure. It was a change in the light. Sarah started working late more often. Not unusual, given her position, but the excuses began to feel rehearsed. Client meeting ran over. Urgent project deadline. I bought it, of course. I trusted her. We'd talked about the pressures of her job, the demanding schedule. I even made a point of being extra supportive, leaving dinner warm for her, sending encouraging texts. But then came the whispers. Not actual voices, but the subtle shifts in her behavior. Her phone became a fortress. She'd clutch it, her thumb hovering over the screen, a slight frown of concentration, and if I happened to glance over, she'd quickly swipe it away, a little too casually. It was the little things, the micro-expressions, the sudden silences when I'd walk into a room. She'd be mid-sentence on a call, and when she saw me, her tone would shift, becoming more formal, more distant. I remember one evening, I was working late myself, trying to finish up a client proposal. It was past midnight when I finally shut my laptop. The house was dark, silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator. Sarah's car was in the driveway, but her bedside lamp was off. I assumed she'd fallen asleep on the couch. I walked into the living room, and there she was, curled up in an armchair, silhouetted against the faint glow of her phone. She didn't even hear me approach. Her face was illuminated by the screen, her expression unreadable. It wasn't exhaustion, it wasn't worry, it was something else, something intense, focused. When I cleared my throat, she jumped, a sharp, almost panicked movement. "Oh, hey," she said, her voice a little breathless. "Didn't hear you come in." "Couldn't sleep?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light, not wanting to sound accusatory. She gave a small, tight smile. "Just thinking." She quickly turned her phone face down, too quickly. "Rough day." "Anything I can do?" I offered, moving closer, wanting to put my arm around her. She flinched, almost imperceptibly, and then stood up. "No, I'm fine, just going to bed." She avoided my gaze. That was the first time I felt it, that cold knot of unease tightening in my stomach. It wasn't just late nights anymore, it was the secrecy, the way she started to withdraw. Our conversations, once so open and easy, began to feel curated,
about her day in broad strokes, the meetings, the projects, but the genuine spark, the shared frustrations and triumphs seemed to be fading. And always her phone was there, a silent, omnipresent barrier. Then came the weekend trips. Team-building retreats, she'd explain, sometimes with a sigh, sometimes with a forced cheerfulness. Out of town, no signal, you know how it is. I'd nod, I'd smile, I'd wish her a good time. But the gnawing doubt was growing, a relentless parasite feeding on my trust. I started checking credit card statements, subtle glances at her online banking. Nothing obvious, just a need to see if the expenses matched the stories. A few hotel bills here and there, restaurant charges, all seemed plausible. But the feeling persisted. I remember one particular trip. She was supposed to be at a conference in Chicago. She'd been talking about it for weeks, a big industry event. She sent me texts throughout the weekend, vague updates about sessions and networking. Sunday evening, I was flicking through channels, feeling a bit lonely, when I saw a news report. A minor traffic incident on the I-90 just outside Chicago. The camera panned over the cars, the flashing lights, and for a split second, I saw it. A distinctive bumper sticker on one of the vehicles, a small, stylized wolf head. It was Sarah's car. I froze, my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Chicago, I-90. But she was supposed to be at a conference hotel, in a ballroom, listening to keynote speakers, not on a highway miles from the city center. I didn't confront her, not then. I was too stunned, too afraid of what I might find, or what I might be imagining. I told myself I was being paranoid, that there had to be an explanation. Maybe she'd gone for a drive to clear her head. Maybe she'd met up with someone. I clung to the possibility of innocence like a drowning man to driftwood. But the seed of suspicion had been planted, and it was beginning to sprout, its tendrils wrapping around my peace of mind. The true horror, the gut-wrenching realization came later. It was a Tuesday. Sarah was at work, a typical day. I was home, catching up on emails, when I got a notification from her cloud storage. She'd shared a folder with me recently, a collection of old photos from her college days. I clicked on it, nostalgic, looking for a specific picture. And then I saw it, a folder labeled Project Nightingale, Q3 Updates. I wasn't supposed to see that. It was clearly marked as work-related, private. My curiosity, now laced with a desperate dread, got the better of me. I clicked it open. Inside were spreadsheets, PowerPoints, meeting minutes, standard corporate stuff. But then, buried within the documents, were email threads. And that's when the world tilted on its axis.
The emails weren't just between Sarah and her colleagues. They were between Sarah and Mark Henderson. Mark, who sat 3 desks away from her. Mark, who I'd met a dozen times at company parties, a decent guy, always with a slightly awkward smile. Mark, who Sarah had complained about his endless, convoluted spreadsheets and his tendency to overshare at lunch. He was her work nemesis, or so she claimed. The emails started innocently enough, work-related discussions, but then they shifted. Thinking of you. Can't wait to see you later. Tonight was amazing. And the dates? The dates corresponded perfectly with her late nights, her client meetings, her team-building retreats. My hands started to tremble. I scrolled down, my breath catching in my throat. There were photos. Casual selfies, taken in what looked like a hotel room. Sarah and Mark, their arms around each other, grinning. And then, the real gut punch. A series of messages, explicit, intimate. They spoke of stolen moments, of whispered secrets, of a passion I thought was mine alone. I remember dropping my laptop. It clattered onto the floor, the screen flashing erratically. I sank into my chair, my body numb, my mind a swirling vortex of disbelief and agony. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't some anonymous encounter. It was Mark, the colleague she confided in me about, the man whose annoying habits she detailed over dinner, painting him as the antithesis of anything remotely desirable. She had taken our shared life, our confidences, our trust, and twisted them into a weapon, a shield for her deception. The
the masterpiece of our love, the life we'd meticulously built, was not a solid structure. It was a facade, and I had just seen the gaping holes in its foundation. The silence in the house was deafening, broken only by the frantic thumping of my own heart, a rhythm of pure, unadulterated betrayal. I looked at the shared folder, the innocent collection of college photos, next to the damning evidence of her infidelity, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, was a stranger. And the worst part? She had been right under my nose, in plain sight, weaving her lies with the threads of our shared life. The thought of her, laughing with him, touching him, made my stomach churn. I was still sitting there, frozen, when I heard the familiar click of her car door in the driveway, the sound that had once signaled my relief at her return, now a harbinger of utter devastation. The car door clicked shut, a sound so ordinary, so routine, yet it echoed in the vast, empty expanse of my living room like a gunshot. I didn't move. I couldn't. My body felt like it was made of lead, anchored to the floor by the sheer weight of what I'd discovered. The emails, the photos, the intimate confessions spewed out onto the glowing screen of my laptop. They were real, undeniable. And Sarah, my Sarah, the woman I'd built my entire existence around, was living a double life. A life that apparently included Mark Henderson, the guy who always smelled faintly of stale coffee and desperation. The sheer audacity of it, the casualness with which she deceived me, it was like a physical blow. I kept replaying her words, her laughter, the little ways she'd touch my arm, the shared jokes, the late-night talks where we'd map out our future. All of it now felt tainted, a performance. Every tender moment, every declaration of love now seemed like a carefully crafted lie, designed to keep me placid, unsuspecting, while she played out her secret drama. My mind raced, grasping for any shred of doubt, any possibility of misinterpretation. Was I seeing things? Was this some elaborate prank? But the cold, hard text on the screen, the undeniable timestamps, the intimate details. No, this was no prank. This was betrayal, raw and ugly. And Mark, God, Mark, I'd always seen him as harmless, a bit of a doofus, really. He'd once spent 15 minutes explaining the intricacies of his fantasy football team to me at a holiday party, and I'd just nodded along, pretending to be interested. Sarah had even commiserated with me afterwards, rolling her eyes and saying, "He's just so earnest, isn't he?" Earnest, right, earnest about screwing my wife. The thought made bile rise in my throat. The front door opened, and I heard her keys jingle in the lock. Footsteps approached, light and familiar. "Honey, I'm home." Her voice, usually a melody, now sounded like a grating screech. I still hadn't moved. I couldn't bring myself to look at her, not yet. I just stared at the laptop screen, the damning evidence still displayed, a silent witness to my shattered world. She walked into the living room, a smile already on her face, her usual routine of greeting me after work. The smile faltered as she took in the scene, my rigid posture, my vacant stare, the laptop open on the floor, its screen casting an eerie blue light on my face. Her eyes widened, a flicker of something, fear, guilt, crossing her features before she schooled her expression. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice a little too bright, a little too forced. She walked towards me, reaching out a hand. I flinched away, and her hand fell back to her side. The small gesture, the instinctive recoiling, seemed to silence her. She stopped a few feet away, her gaze darting between me and the laptop. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice now tinged with a genuine, albeit hesitant concern. I finally looked at her, really looked at her, the Sarah I knew, the one with the fire in her eyes, the easy laugh. She was still beautiful, of course, but now in this moment, I saw a stranger. Her face, usually so open, was guarded. Her eyes, which I'd once sworn held entire universes, now seemed to hold secrets, a carefully constructed facade. "You tell me, Sarah," I said, my voice raspy, unfamiliar even to myself. I gestured vaguely at the laptop. What is Project Nightingale? Her breath hitched, just a slight intake of air, but I heard it, and I saw it, the momentary widening of her eyes, the slight tremor in her hand as she clasped it behind her back. It was all the confirmation I needed. The carefully constructed composure began to crumble. It's a work thing, she stammered, her gaze dropping to the floor. A new initiative they're launching. Really? I managed a hollow laugh, because it looks like a bunch of emails. Emails between you and Mark Henderson. Emails that talk about amazing nights and can't wait to see you. I forced myself to meet her eyes. And photos, Sarah. Photos of you and him, looking awfully cozy. The color drained from her face. She looked trapped, cornered. The practice calm was gone, replaced by a raw panic. How did you see those? She whispered, her voice barely audible. I shared a folder with you, remember? College photos. I let the words hang in the air, heavy with accusation. Apparently you decided to add a little more modern flair to it, with Project Nightingale, real original. Silence, the kind of silence that screams volumes. The hum of the refrigerator, once a background noise, now seemed deafening. I watched her, searching for an explanation, a denial, anything that could make sense of this unfathomable betrayal. But all I saw was a woman caught in the act, her carefully constructed lies unraveling before my eyes. Finally she spoke, her voice trembling.
It's not what you think. That old, familiar phrase. The one you hear in movies. The one you scoff at when it's someone else's drama. Now, it was being directed at me. And it felt like a slap in the face. Oh, really? I stood up, my legs feeling unsteady. What do I think, Sarah? Because right now, I think my wife is having an affair with her colleague, using work as a cover, and that she's been lying to me for months, maybe even longer. Tears welled up in her eyes. Genuine tears. I'd seen them before, usually when she was frustrated or upset about work. But these felt different. They were the tears of someone who'd been exposed, not necessarily of remorse. It just happened, she whispered, looking away. It wasn't planned. It's just complicated. Complicated. Of course it was complicated. Everything was always complicated with Sarah when it involved her work. But this wasn't work. This was something else entirely. This was a betrayal that cut to the core, not just of our marriage, but of my very sense of reality. Complicated? I repeated, my voice rising. You call this complicated? This is you sleeping with Mark Henderson. This is you lying to me, sneaking around, pretending everything is fine while you're building a life with someone else. How is that complicated, Sarah? It sounds pretty damn simple to me. She finally looked at me, her eyes red and pleading. Please, you don't understand. It wasn't just sex. It was, we connected on a level. She trailed off, unable to articulate it, or perhaps unwilling to. Connected? The word was a bitter pill. And what about me? What about us? Did you forget about that connection when you were with him? Did you forget about the vows we made, about the life we built? My voice cracked. The carefully constructed anger was starting to crumble, revealing the raw pain beneath. No, of course not, she cried, stepping forward. I love you more than anything. That's why this is so hard. It's just, there was a void, and he filled it, for a while. A void. She felt a void. And I, her husband, the man who was supposed to be her rock, her confidant, her everything, had apparently failed to fill it. The guilt, the shame, it washed over me. Had I become complacent? Had I let myself get so comfortable that I stopped seeing her, stopped nurturing our connection? The thought was a fresh wave of agony. But then I remembered the emails, the intimacy she'd shared with Mark, the explicit descriptions. It wasn't just filling a void, it was a deliberate, active choice to seek solace, passion, and connection elsewhere. A void? I scoffed, the bitterness returning. So you decided to fill that void with my colleague. My God, Sarah,
You didn't just cheat, you disrespected everything we had. You took the trust I placed in you, the trust I placed in him, and you stomped all over it. She started to sob, great heaving sobs that shook her body. I know I messed up. I messed up so badly. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if I can fix this. I watched her cry, and a part of me, the part that still loved the woman I thought I knew, wanted to go to her, to hold her, to try and mend the shattered pieces. But the other part, the part that felt the searing pain of betrayal, the part that saw Mark Henderson's smug face in my mind's eye, recoiled. How could I ever trust her again? How could I ever look at her without seeing the ghost of him in her eyes? Fix this, I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. How do you fix something like this, Sarah? How do you unring a bell? How do you unsay the words, unsee the photos, unfeel the gut-wrenching pain of knowing the person you loved most in the world has been lying to you, systematically, for who knows how long? She just stood there, her face buried in her hands, her sobs the only sound in the room. I couldn't bear to look at her anymore. The love I felt for her, once a burning inferno, had been doused with ice water. It wasn't gone, not entirely, but it was buried deep beneath a mountain of hurt and anger. I need some air, I managed, my voice rough. I turned and walked towards the front door, the emails still glowing on my laptop screen, a constant, searing reminder of the life I thought I had. I needed to get out, to breathe, to escape the suffocating reality of my home. As I opened the door, I heard her call my name, a desperate plea that barely registered. I stepped out into the cool night air, leaving her alone with her tears and her confession and the wreckage of our marriage. The streetlights cast long, distorted shadows, and for the first time in my life, I felt utterly, completely alone. The weight of her betrayal settled on my shoulders, a crushing burden, and I walked away from the house, from the life we had built, with no idea where I was going, or what I was going to do next. The silence of the night was a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me, a storm of questions, of anger, of a profound, soul-deep ache that threatened to consume me whole. I kept replaying the emails, the photos, Mark's stupid, awkward smile, and then another thought, colder and more insidious than the rest, began to creep in. Was this the first time? Was this the only time? The sheer scope of the deception, the depth of her lies, it opened up a Pandora's box of agonizing possibilities, each one more devastating than the last. I stopped walking, leaning against a cold metal lamppost, the world spinning slightly. Was it just Mark, or were there others? The thought was unbearable. I had to know, I absolutely had to know, but the prospect of digging deeper, of unearthing more truths I might not be able to handle, was almost as terrifying as the initial discovery. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from Sarah. My hand trembled as I pulled it out. The screen lit up, displaying a single, desperate message. We need to talk. Please, don't go. But I couldn't stay. Not now, not yet. The damage was too fresh, the wound too deep. I turned my phone off, the screen going black, and walked further into the darkness, the unanswered questions of physical pain in my chest. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that this was just the beginning of a long, agonizing unraveling. The life I knew was gone, replaced by a landscape of uncertainty and pain, and I was lost in its desolate terrain. The sound of my own ragged breathing was the only thing that cut through the thick, suffocating quiet. The cold asphalt bit into my soles as I walked, aimless, the city's indifferent glow a stark contrast to the darkness I felt inside me. Every passing car was a reminder of the life I'd been living, the one I thought was solid, real, and now felt like it was built on quicksand. I kept turning the same thoughts over and over, like a damaged record skipping on the same groove. Sarah, Mark, the emails, the photos, the utter, breathtaking ease with which she'd apparently compartmentalized her life, her emotions, her entire being. It was a level of deception I couldn't fathom, couldn't process. It wasn't just a mistake, it was a deliberate, calculated act that had the power to dismantle everything. And that's what was killing me, the calculated part. The thought that this wasn't some impulsive, regrettable moment. This was a sustained performance. I ended up at a bar when I'd never been to before. Dimly lit, sticky tables, the smell of stale beer and regret.
I sat down at the furthest stool from anyone, ordered a whiskey, neat. The bartender, a grizzled guy with tired eyes, just nodded and poured. He'd seen it all, I guessed. People like me. People who walked in with a life and walked out with this. The whiskey burned, a welcome, sharp sensation that cut through the dull ache. I nursed it, staring into the amber liquid, seeing not my reflection, but the ghosts of Sarah's promises. "I love you," she'd said. It was a lie then, or at least a half-truth so twisted it might as well have been a lie. How could she love me, truly love me, and do this? How could she look me in the eye, share our bed, our meals, our future plans, all while building something else, something illicit, with another man? The connection she spoke of, it felt like a cruel joke. My connection to her was my life. Hers, apparently, was something she sought elsewhere, something she found with Mark Henderson. Mark, the guy who always had a story about his ailing dog or his epic commute. Now, all I could see was his face, the face of a man who participated in the systematic dismantling of my world. I ordered another, and then another. The edges of the bar started to blur, the conversations around me a low hum that I couldn't quite tune into. My phone was dead, intentionally. I didn't want any more texts, any more pleas, any more explanations that would inevitably make things worse or just sound hollow. I needed time to think, to breathe, to try and pull myself out of the vortex of Sarah's confession. She said it wasn't planned, it just happened. That's the part that gnawed at me, the "it just happened" excuse. People don't just happen into an affair. It takes active participation, choice, a series of small decisions that snowball into a seismic betrayal. Was she telling the truth? Or was that just another layer of the lie? The ambiguity was a poison. I needed clarity, even if that clarity was going to shatter what little remained of my heart. I imagined confronting her again, not the raw emotional scene that had just unfolded, but a cold, hard interrogation. "How long, Sarah?" I could hear myself asking, my voice devoid of emotion. Who else? The thought of those questions, of the answers that might follow, was almost paralyzing. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing there was no safe way down. The more I thought about it, the more I felt a cold rage start to build, a different kind of anger than the initial shock. This was a deeper, more insidious kind of fury. The fury of being made a fool of, the fury of realizing that the last several months, maybe even a year or more, had been a charade. Every whispered "I love you," every intimate touch, every shared moment of vulnerability, all of it had been a lie, a performance. I paid my tab, the numbers blurring on the receipt. Stumbling out into the night air, the chill was a shock. It felt like stepping into a different dimension. The street was mostly empty. I needed to get home, not to Sarah, not to that house filled with ghosts, but to my own space, my own familiar emptiness. I hailed a cab. The driver, a young woman with bright pink streaks in her hair, didn't ask questions, just took my address. The ride was silent. I watched the city lights streak by, each one a tiny, burning star in the vast, dark sky. It felt like a metaphor for my life. A million tiny lights, all flickering out, leaving me in the dark. When I got home, the house was silent, too silent. Sarah was gone. I checked the bedroom. Her side of the closet was still full. Her purse was on the dresser. She hadn't packed. She'd left the house after our conversation, the one where she'd broken me. And then, what? Gone back to Mark? Or just driven around crying, like I had? The uncertainty was a physical ache. I walked into the living room, the laptop still open on the floor. I stared at it for a long time, the glowing screen a monument to my destruction. I finally reached out and closed it, the click echoing in the stillness. It felt like closing a chapter, not of a book, but my entire life. I sat on the couch, the familiar
emotions feeling alien. The silence pressed in. I thought about calling my best friend Dave. He was solid, always had been. But what would I say? Hey Dave, guess what? My wife's been sleeping with a coworker, and I just found out. How do you even begin to articulate that level of gut-wrenching devastation? It felt too raw, too personal, too messy. I wasn't ready to share this horror with anyone. It was mine to bear, mine to navigate. I knew I had to confront her. Not for an apology, not for explanations anymore, but for clarity, for closure. I needed to see her face, to hear her voice, to understand, if possible, the depth of the chasm between us. I needed to know if there was anything left, anything salvageable, or if this was truly the end. The thought of divorce, of dividing our lives, our assets, our memories, it was overwhelming. It felt like the end of everything I'd ever known. I found myself staring at her wedding ring, sitting on the nightstand. It was simple, elegant, a symbol of our vows. Now it felt like a mockery. I picked it up. It was heavy, cold. I turned it over and over in my fingers, the metal cool against my skin. I thought about the day we'd put them on, the promises we'd made, the hope we'd shared. Had it all been for nothing? Had she ever truly meant any of it? A flicker of movement caught my eye. It was Sarah, standing in the doorway of the living room. She looked pale, her eyes puffy, her hair disheveled. She'd been crying, and still was. She held a crumpled tissue in her hand. Her gaze was fixed on me, on the ring in my hand. "You're still here," she whispered, her voice hoarse. I didn't look up. Where else would I go? My voice was flat, devoid of the emotion that was still raging inside me. She took a hesitant step into the room. I thought you'd left. I needed to think. I finally met her eyes. They were filled with a desperate sadness, a profound regret. But was it for me, or for herself, for the life she was losing? "I'm so sorry," she choked out, tears streaming down her face again. "I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you like this." "But you did," I said, the words like stones. "You didn't just hurt me, Sarah. You destroyed me. You took everything I believed in, everything I thought we were, and you shattered it." She sank onto the edge of the coffee table, her shoulders shaking. I know I did, and I don't know how to fix it. I don't know if it can be fixed. Fix it. I finally stood up, the ring still in my hand. How do you fix something like this, Sarah? How do you rebuild trust when it's been so thoroughly annihilated? How do you unsee the truth, unfeel the pain, unknow that the person you trusted most has been living a lie? She looked at me, her eyes searching mine, pleading. "I don't know, but I want to try. If you'll let me, if there's anything left to try for." I walked over to her, the ring still clenched in my fist. I stood over her, looking down at the woman I had loved, the woman who had betrayed me so completely. The love was still there, a faint ember buried under layers of ice. But so was the hurt, the anger, the profound sense of loss. "I can't," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I can't do this, Sarah. Not now. Maybe not ever."
I opened my hand, and the wedding ring fell from my grasp, landing on the polished wood of the coffee table with a soft clink. It was a sound that reverberated through the room, a final, definitive punctuation mark. She gasped, her eyes wide with shock and a dawning horror. "I need to leave," I said, turning away from her, from the ring, from the wreckage of our life. I walked towards the front door, the weight of my decision settling upon me, heavy and absolute. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The door closed behind me, the click a stark, empty sound. I stepped out into the night, the air cool and sharp against my skin. The streetlights seemed to blur, the world a watercolor of muted colors. I didn't know where I was going, or what the future held, but I knew one thing with chilling certainty. The life I had known was over. The man I was yesterday was gone, replaced by someone raw, broken, but somehow, finally, free from the suffocating weight of
first time since I'd opened that laptop, I could breathe. A ragged, painful breath, but a breath nonetheless. And in that exhale, in the quiet surrender to the unknown, I found a sliver of something that might, one day, be peace.